is Tom, and I'm here to talk to you today about a new product from Orion Pyrotechnics called the Hydra Sequencer. And the Hydra Sequencer is meant to be a low-cost option to expand and enhance your current firing system. Before I talk about the specifics of the Hydra Sequencer, how to use it, how it works, etc., I'd like to take a few moments and talk about sequencers and steppers in general and the difference between those two items. So on the board behind me, I have a very simple diagram just to illustrate the differences. Now, we can imagine an existing firing system with 3 cues. This could either be a wired firing system with a cable that goes back to a firing panel, or it could be a wireless firing system where this is a module of some sort. Now, in this illustration, we only have 3 cues, and ordinarily we would connect our igniters to Q1, 2, 3, etc. And that's all you get. Now, with a stepper, which is traditionally the lowest cost option to expand a firing system, you could run a piece of scab wire from, let's say, Q3 on your existing firing system to the input on the stepper. Now, when you fire Q3 on your firing system, it will actually fire QA on the stepper. If I try to fire Q3 again on the firing system, we're now going to fire QB on the stepper. And hitting it a third time, we fire QC, and so forth. So in the case of a stepper, in order to fire all the cues on the stepper, we need an equal number of input pulses from your existing firing system. Now, a sequencer works in a very similar way, but the difference between a sequencer and a stepper is that the sequencer allows you to store time steps between those cues. So in the case of the sequencer, we again run a piece of scab wire from, supposing, cue number 3 on the existing firing system into the input on the sequencer. Now we program time steps between QA and B, and between QB and QC. The sequencer, when it receives one input pulse, will fire all 3 cues, each cue separated by the time step that's stored. For instance, I press Q3 on my existing firing system, the sequencer will immediately fire QA. It will then wait the desired time step before firing QB. It will again wait the desired time step before firing QC, and so forth. Okay, so that's the very quick rundown on steppers and sequencers. Now I'd like to talk about some of the specifics of the Hydra Sequencer. Now that we're familiar with basic steppers and sequencers, let's take a minute to talk specifically about the Hydra Sequencer. Now the Hydra Sequencer allows you to expand an existing system by adding 18 more cues. It operates in either the stepper or sequencer mode. It includes onboard continuity testing, and it's chainable, meaning that you can connect the output from one sequencer to the input on another sequencer, thus expanding your system even further. Also, it has adjustable dwell for E-matches and talons. Dwell is the amount of time that a cue is held on for before it's shut off. This is important because talons require a longer on time than E-matches do. Now the Hydra Sequencer works really well for Comet or Mine runs. It allows you to improve the firing speed of your existing firing system because it's capable of accurately firing cues within 1 millisecond of each other. It also includes a standard DB25 connection configured for use with Cobra slats for long fronts. Now it's a fairly easy matter to reconfigure that DB25 connector in case the customer wishes to use a different type of slat. Also, it has a connection for an external battery which allows you to use firing voltages up to 32 volts. A high voltage option is also available, but you'll have to contact us separately about that. Now the Hydra Sequencer is also continuity safe. This means that you can perform continuity checks on your firing system and not worry about accidentally triggering your sequencer. Now this may seem like a fairly obvious thing, but not all sequencers on the market are continuity safe. Once you arm them, if you try to perform a continuity test with your firing system, you may accidentally trigger the sequence. This will not happen with the Hydra Sequencer because it's protected from false trigger events. The sequencer is powered by 2 internal 9-volt batteries that are easily accessible from the side of the case. Alternatively, you may use the external battery connections to power the sequencer from an external rechargeable battery. Now there are 15 preset time steps for easy in-the-field programming. Also, there is an advanced programming method. This allows you to program arbitrary sequences of any length and any time step you desire. So I mentioned that there are 15 different time steps available for in-the-field programming, and that's what's shown here on the table. Notice that the time steps range from 0.05 seconds all the way up to 5 seconds, and then there is one value of -1. That -1 value effectively puts the sequencer into step mode, and we'll talk about that more later when we actually demonstrate the unit. You can also do custom sequences using the advanced programming method. They're entered via the computer as up to 18 numbers corresponding to time steps in milliseconds. Any time steps not entered take the default value of -1. Time steps between cues 6 and 7 and between 12 and 13 must be equal to or greater than 1/2 of the dwell, and again we'll talk about that later when we demonstrate the unit. Also, I'd like to point out that input pulses after all the cues are fired will generate output pulses. However, the output pulse cannot source enough current to fire an igniter. It's important that you do not connect an igniter to the output as it could cause permanent damage. Okay, so let's take a look at the actual Hydra sequencer and walk through how to use it.